Hello, this is the Demographics Decoded podcast with me, demographer Simon Küstenmacher.
And me, Michael Yardney, property and wealth creation expert. And this is the podcast where we unveil the trends shaping our futures. In this episode, we're going to dive into a topic that's got significant implications for the Australian workforce and actually for our society at large, the transition that Australia's made to a knowledge-based economy. As Australia evolves into a knowledge-based society, the nature of our jobs and the skills required have changed dramatically. So today, Simon and I are going to explore these shifts and their social impact. So whether you're an investor, a business owner, simply interested in understanding the forces shaping our society, today's episode should be packed with insights that you don't want to miss. So welcome back again, Simon.
It's great to be back on. Always a pleasure.
Well, we've now been doing this for a couple of months, and we can see with the YouTube views and with the Apple and Spotify podcasts, we've built quite an audience. Clearly, a lot of people are interested in their future, Simon.
As they should be. Fully self-serving narrative, obviously, from a demographer. But yeah, it's fun to help explore to a growing audience how demographics shape the world and how those big picture demographic drivers are really the closest thing to a crystal ball that we do have access to. And, I always claim that if you view the world from a multitude of perspectives, you end up being a better parent, partner, business investor, whatever it is. You can make more complex decisions. And so I hope that people continue to get benefits from viewing the world through the demographic lens.
Well, the crystal ball that you mentioned is exactly what we're wanting to talk about, because the demographics really is the facts and figures of what's going to affect our future. We have to then interpret how it affects businesses, investors, entrepreneurs. And one of the things I've noticed over my 71, 72 turns around the sun is how Australia has changed, how the jobs in Australia have changed, how the skills required have changed, how the advice we've got to give our children if they ask, what sort of a job should I do, change. So, Simon, today I'd like to explore these shifts and the social impact, because the theme of this podcast, as we just mentioned, is unveiling the trends that shape the future. And in my mind, this type of information is going to be important for business owners, for entrepreneurs, parents, students. So I guess for everybody to understand. So, Simon, let's have a quick talk about how Australia's transitioned into a knowledge-based society over the last couple of decades. Can you maybe elaborate on some of how this has occurred?
Yeah, so what we're seeing is, in a sense, a stock standard transition of an economy. We started out being a purely agricultural economy. We essentially just raised sheep, after settlement pretty quickly, and sold that to the world. And we're still that. We're still an agricultural powerhouse. We still produce a lot of food and agricultural products and sell this to the world. Then,
if I could interrupt you for a second, if you go to some of the country towns, Simon, you can see some of the big mansions that were there at the turn of the century, last century, 1900s. In fact, property in some of those big country towns, rural towns, which were living off the sheep's back, as they said, were much more expensive than little shacks in our big capital cities.
Absolutely. It drove the wealth, and agriculture, before the major industrial revolutions came out of England, that is what drove down what made wealth, was agricultural products. And so we had that going on for quite a while in Australia. Tasmania was there to provide the big trees for the shipbuilding industry. Yeah, that's an agricultural product turned into an early industrial product, still done with manual tools and so forth. But so we had these natural materials out there. We created wealth out of this. We then transitioned into a more and more industrialized economy. That, of course, culminated essentially in the manufacturing decades of the 60s and 70s, where that dominated. In Australia, we built cars and so forth in the country then. And so people had factory jobs back then. That was the most common job. We went from the farms to the factories. And then bit by bit, with the advent of computer technology, we moved from the factories on into the offices of this world. So we continued to transition into this knowledge economy in this country. And along with this, we shifted the kind of skills that we need. We then adjust the educational system to make sure that we equip more and more people with those skills that you need in an office rather than in a factory. So it turns out in an office environment, you operate more on your intellect. That means we need to teach you for longer. Everyone finishes high school. We push you through several university degrees, and more people in Australia went down this path. So we ever increased the share of people who are doing this. So that's the transition into a knowledge economy that we are talking about. And that is not yet finished. We're continuing to push more and more Australian workers into those knowledge jobs. Those jobs traditionally took place in an office, and now increasingly, at least some of the time, take place from home, at the home office, at the study.
Well, that's an interesting concept, because what I learned over the years is where your workplace is depends upon the tools that you use to create your job. So in the old days, when you worked on the farm, when you used the tools on the farm, that's where the workplace was. And then people moved into factories because that's where the tools they use to manufacture things. And then the photocopier, I guess, and eventually the computer became the tools of offices as we moved to offices. And now with the knowledge-based society, our phones, our tablets, our computers allow us to work everywhere. Now, Simon, last week when we were talking about median house prices and about the property market, we discussed the various skill levels. Now, I'm going to ask you to repeat that because it's relevant to this discussion. But if people listened to this last week, I think it's still worth hearing it again. And by the way, if you haven't listened to last week's podcast or watched it on YouTube, or you haven't currently subscribed to this, please subscribe to the Demographics Decoded podcast. And then while you're there, just download it, because each week Simon and I have got a message for you. And now there's a series of 8 previous shows, each on different topics, but all helping you unveil your future. Sure, there's some common themes, Simon. So maybe we could just talk about this as we transition to a knowledge-based society. How do you decide what is a knowledge-based job? How do we categorize these jobs?
Yes, so that's difficult. It's not really clear-cut answers, because technically it's never jobs that are knowledge-based, but tasks. And then most jobs have a multitude of tasks. If you think about the stock standard office worker, they probably do 50 different tasks in a day. And as long as most of them are knowledge-based, intellectual-based, we call this a knowledge job. But there is an easier way. There's a nice shortcut that the ABS offers us. And that has to do with the census. My most beloved day of the year, only comes around every 5 years actually, census night, is when you are being asked, hey, what's your job? You put your answer into the form, and the ABS takes your answer and puts whatever your answer was, your job, puts it into one of 1,300 categories. That's the number of jobs that officially exist. And each of those jobs get assigned a skill level, a number from 1 to 5, that indicates how much formal training is required for you to do the job. Skill level 1 jobs, you're not allowed to do unless you have a university qualification of sorts. So doctors, engineers, a lot of training and a lot of money. The more highly educated you are, the more money you make. Skill level 2 jobs require a lot of training, but not a uni degree. So firefighters, police officers. Skill level 3 jobs are the backbone of the Australian middle class, traditionally speaking. You need a TAFE level, a technical degree, to get in there. These are where all your trade degrees sit, your tradies, the jobs, your plumbers, electricians. Quite a few manufacturing jobs need that as well. Skill level 4 jobs are called low skill jobs. You need some sort of qualification, maybe a truck driving license, a forklift license. And in skill level 5, you don't need any formal training. All you need to know for the job, you will be taught on the job. So that's the rough lay of the land. And what happened as we transitioned away from this manufacturing industry is that those skill level 3 jobs that made up the majority of employment in Australia in the 60s, we shriveled them down to, it's technically only 13% now. So they are now actually the smallest share of the workforce. So the Australian middle class, increasingly less important. All the while, we grew over the last, well, we really have data from the mid 80s until now, over the last 40 years, we grew the share of skill level 1 workers from 21 or 22% to around 36%. So we massively increased the share of highly skilled knowledge workers already. And we know that this transition isn't finished simply by looking at 29-year-olds. At 29, you tend to have already finished a university education. And we then know that if we look at the workforce age 29 years of age, about half of them, 48%, I think, have a job that require a university level education. So we're not finished with this transition towards a knowledge economy. That is guaranteed to continue to happen. It's one of those nice and easy forecasts to make because we will be right with this development. Yeah, crazy changes would need to occur to make this differently. So you can know that there's a bigger chunk of people in knowledge jobs. That's a given at this point.
So how do more of these skill level 1 knowledge jobs affect our overall economy and the job market moving forward, Simon?
As you pointed out, and I hadn't heard this before, you move to where your tools are. And the tools of those office workers, of those new knowledge workers, they are actually at 2 places at the same time. They're at the office where their employer puts their logo on top of the building, and they're in your spare bedroom at home. But because you tend to not work fully remotely, most people, most knowledge workers work in a hybrid setting. And that means you still need to go to the office occasionally. So we will still gravitate to the office. So we're not moving into the absolute hinterlands. We will still stay within the gravitational pull of our office tower. We can move further away though, because we don't need to commute every day. If you commute only once or twice a week, you tend to be willing to do a longer commute. So what we can do across Australia, we can draw a 2-hour drive time radius around our big CBDs, and that's the new commuting radius. Everything within this 2-hour drive time radius is where knowledge workers are willing to live. Everything outside of it, they're not willing to live. It's quite hilarious how you can repeat this exercise with every single capital city.
Of course, not all the jobs are in the CBD, Simon. So, in fact, the majority of jobs are outside the CBD. And in fact, a lot of industries and knowledge jobs are moving away just to be able to accommodate these sort of things.
Exactly. It's always a bit of a give and take with employers and workers. And for the next couple of decades, I would actually say that the balance of power shifts more towards the workers, that the workers can dictate more where they want to use their tools. Because one of my main demographic truisms about the future we talked about in previous episodes is that we're running out of workers. And if you have fewer workers, that means that the employers are a bit more accommodating to the workers' wishes. And the workers want to work from home, at least some of the time. And so we know that millennials, the biggest number of workers, they move to the outskirts of town.
Simon, if we look at the different demographic groups, and we discussed the different demographic groups in, I think, our second podcast. So again, a gentle reminder to go back and have a listen to this. More millennials are now knowledge-based workers than their parents, the baby boomers. Does that mean that the next generation are going to be wealthier?
Yes, to a degree. So they will earn higher incomes. So if you go further down the generation, so from baby boomers to Gen X to millennials, now to Gen Z, people will earn more incomes. But does that make them richer? That is a question that is, of course, linked to one of our favorite topics, house prices in Australia. You can earn more money and still not be as wealthy as your parents because you're not able to accrue wealth through property, for example. So yes, they will definitely earn more money. But they might feel and actually be less wealthy than their parents. But they will be more likely to be knowledge workers, so they will be more likely to work with, digital types, laptop-based jobs. That'll be the norm increasingly for our young workers as we continue to transition into this knowledge economy.
Now, millennial women now seem to dominate the higher education levels. They're more likely to hold skill level 1 and skill level 2 jobs compared to men, and particularly so compared to previous generation. So what are the broader social and economic implications of this trend, Simon?
That's a fascinating topic, because over the last couple of years, or decades really, after being locked out of the workforce, women are now very, very much participating in the workforce. To a degree now, the female workforce participation rate is so high that we can't possibly put more women in the workforce. We can put them into the workforce at bigger rates, meaning switching from part-time to full-time, but adding more women is close to impossible now. That said, so if women are outperforming men on every level of education, primary, secondary, tertiary education, and if we know that the best indicator for your income in this country is your level of education, that means by definition that we will increasingly see more and more couples where the woman is the higher income earner. And that changes quite a few social dynamics, because households are rather pragmatic. So once you add your first baby to the mix, yes, the woman will continue to be pregnant. Yes, the woman will continue to do the initial child rearing. But once it becomes time to go back to work, who will go back to work? Will it be the woman with the higher income earning potential, or will it be the man with the lower income earning potential in these couples? Households will be very, very pragmatic. They can probably not operate on a single income, but they will come, and increasingly are doing so, with arrangements where the woman goes into the workforce at a fuller capacity than the man. She works for 4 days, he works for 3 days. And that bit by bit changes the balance of power in the workforce. We'll see more and more couples where the gender pay gap just gets eroded that way. We slowly chip away this way. And I would also argue that as you have it normalized for men to be at home more frequently as the primary caregiver, that then the still overwhelmingly male leadership cohorts in this country will come up with ideas to offer more generous parental leave packages.
That's fascinating you say that, because one of my daughters is a general practitioner. Her husband was a high school teacher, and after their third baby, she stayed home initially, and then he stayed on as the caregiver, and she went back to work, as you suggested, only working part-time, but it managed to earn, just because of her skill level 1 job, even more than him. So yes, there are going to be these changes. Also, when you just have a look at the CEOs of the various companies, more women are ending up much higher up the ranks of running businesses, running organizations than there were in previous generations.
Yeah, and quite often people point to something like, yes, we take in the same number of graduates, male and female, in a big organization, but the board is still overwhelmingly male. We need to fix this. I can assure you that this is automatically going to be fixed in the next 10, 20 years without any quotas. Quotas might help and so forth, but even without this, it's guaranteed to be fixed, because we already do not have a gender pay gap for anyone under the age of 50 if you exclude parents. So if you only look at men and women who do not have kids, they earn the same amount of money if they're under 50. We do not discriminate based on gender in this country. We discriminate to a certain degree based on primary care. And since the current setup of the workforce suggests that we have more and more primary carers, not the majority, but more and more primary carers being men, that also means that the gender pay gap only knows one way, and that is we're closing it. That's baked into the demographic pie. It's one of those nice forecasts that there is no other scenario in this. We know what's coming. We know how this happened in the past. We know what's ahead. Easy win, this forecast.
Well, the theme of my questioning and my discussion with you today is really about the way jobs are going to be in the future and how safe is your job or how secure is your income. I think there's not going to be enough workers around. So in general, people's jobs are safe, Simon. But recently, the National Skills Commission projected employment growth for skill level 1 and 2 workers to outgrow requirements for the other skill levels. Now, this is not a judge of people where they've got different skill levels, but it's really, I guess, to do with their level of education. How do you see this extra requirement of skill level 1 and 2 jobs shaping the future of the Australian workforce?
So if we continue to transition into an economy that needs more skill level 1 and 2 workers, because we are a knowledge economy, obviously we need to train more of those workers. So that's what we are doing. That is, again, a simple forecast to make. And of course, if you look at the impact that something like automation makes, AI, it is more lower skilled jobs that we can automate. So we will lose the demand for low income jobs, for low skilled jobs, because machines they're not tend to take over a job per se, but they tend to take over certain parts of a job so that the individual worker in this job can do more of these other tasks. And then ultimately you end up with fewer workers in a manufacturing facility. You'll have more self-driving vehicles of sorts, not trucks anytime soon, but maybe some sort of delivery vehicle that drives itself. That then takes away those low-skilled jobs. Those lower-skilled workers are then, at least theoretically, available for other jobs. You need to upskill them. You need to guide them into those other jobs. But why wouldn't they want to take them? Because they are moving up the value chain. They are moving up into higher income-earning realms. That is a more desirable career, at least structurally speaking. So that's what shall occur.
Now, clearly the information that you're sharing with us is based on the research from the demographics group that you're a partner in, a founder in, and I know you consult to businesses, to organisations in particular, to governments as well. So I think it's really important for businesses to understand these changes because they've got a plan for their future. I guess that's partly what this podcast is about as well. But if you're interested in having Simon speak to your organisation, speak to your business, or get benefit from his research, I'm going to leave a link in the show notes to the demographics group and have a chat with Fiona there to find out whether it would be of benefit for you. I know our team and a lot of others have got great benefit from Simon's thoughts in the past as well. Simon, as we're looking at all this, how are the previous generations, my generation, the baby boomers, compared to the younger generations now, looking at jobs? What's the big difference been to their career paths? I guess in the old days, people would think I'd have a job, I'd have it for 50, 60 years, I'd retire and get a gold watch. But the younger generation, despite the higher skill levels, don't seem to be as tied down to one job over their lifetime.
No, not at all. And that really has to do with the broad environment in which you grow up. We talked about the ovarian lottery in the last or two podcasts ago. And so the idea then is the way that baby boomers grew up was very different from the current generations. Baby boomers were this gigantic birth cohorts, 3.5 kids per woman, big families, a big cohort. So baby boomers got quite clear messages that you have to compete for a job. There was many of them fighting for few jobs. So it was a big success if you land a job, and then even better of a success if you manage to hold on to one of those coveted jobs for multiple decades. What a great success. That's baby boomers. Lots of boomers, relatively few jobs. Now you zoom forward a couple of decades, people that are entering the world of work right now, the tiny Gen Zs, they are part of a really small cohort, entering the world of work in times of low unemployment, in times of a desperate skills shortage. Of course, they can put more demands towards their employers. And we now have those weird, almost comical situations where those baby boomer bosses who are still around, who have not retired, interviewing those young folks. And it drives them mad because the young folks, they flip the interview. They say stuff like, yeah, to be honest, I really only want to work 4 days. Most of them I want to work from home. When can I expect my holiday? And really, if I have to go to the office, I want to bring my dog to work. And the baby boomers, they just go, mate, you haven't worked a single day in your life. What is this all about? And that's just leverage. This is the circumstances of your here and now are impacting your expectations, your demands. Yes, you can call the young people entitled, but to be honest, they have the right macroeconomic backing to make demands.
Interesting how the world has changed over time, being a baby boomer and having employed people over time. Now, Simon, when we talk about then how there's more females in the workforce at higher skill level jobs, how is this affecting the home markets? I always like bringing things back in my mind to how it's going to affect the property markets. What are your thoughts on that? Single and wealthy female home buyers in particular.
Yeah. First and foremost, if we have more and more single females, so one reason why we'd say, why is there an increase of single female home buyers? Why would women be more likely to be single? And that has to do with one social kind of trend that has not changed yet. So traditionally speaking, we're talking about the days when women were locked out of the workforce, when their only way up the social ladder was to marry a richer guy. That still is stuck. And we know this from behavior from online dating platforms where you can filter. Women only want to date. It's called upward social mobility of females is the sociological term for it. They filter out men that are less educated than they are or that earn less money. Now that women are on average better educated and have a chance of earning more income than men, at least the women at the top, they will find it incredibly difficult to find a partner that is up to their standard, that out-earn them and that are at least equally educated than they are. So if those women say that there are no good men around, they kind of have a point. So it's actually true for them. And that then means they will just stay single. Because why bother settling for something below your standards? And so the scenario is either that they stay single for longer, which I think will happen, or you say they'll lower their standards. And to be honest, these kind of highly educated, super skilled, super successful women, I do not see them lowering their standards at scale. Some will. It's not a black and white kind of narrative here. But so you have then more women with a lot of money that do not need massive houses. So you're a single female, but you want a house or a flat, whatever it is, that is for you. So these apartments will be in high demand in commutable distance to your place of work, hopefully a lifestyle destination, ideally, and they need to have all the luxuries of life. They need to be convenient dwellings because, hey, this is a career-focused woman that is then buying this property. So they do not want to spend their evenings looking after the house. They got better things to do.
Well, Simon, I've enjoyed talking about the changing landscape of employment in Australia, and I want to catch up with you again next week because I'm going to swing the discussion a bit to property. I'd like to have a bit of a chat about why the younger generations are leaving their house purchase decisions to later in life and what that means for the property markets. And even if you're not interested in property, it does have a lot of implications to businesses as well. So if you don't currently subscribe to this podcast or follow it, depending upon which app you're using, just stop for a sec and click on the subscribe button, follow it, download it so that each week you're going to get the benefits of Simon and my information. Simon, I look forward to catching up with you again next week.
Fantastic. Looking forward to this as well.
This Demographics Decoded podcast was brought to you by Metropole Property Strategists. We provide a complete range of services to help our clients safely create intergenerational wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you're looking to buy an investment property or your next home, why not have a discovery chat with one of our wealth strategists? Go to metropole.com.au and explore your options. You'll find we're much more than just another buyer's agent. We provide a complete range of services, including property and wealth advisory, home buying, buyer's agency, property management, renovations, and development management services. The team will help you with frameworks that I've fine-tuned over 5 decades, and we've been helping clients with for over 25 years. We're big enough to tip the scales in your favour, but still small enough to care. You can follow me on social media, but I suggest you also follow Simon Kirstmacher. You'll find him regularly posting on all the social media platforms. I'll include links in the show notes. And thanks for spending the last little while with Simon and me. I hope you got some benefit from the show. And if you did, and you know somebody else who'd also benefit, please tell them about the Demographics Decoded podcast. There's a share button on every podcast app. You'll be doing them a favour. I hope you will anyway, and you're definitely going to be doing us a favour, helping us in our quest to make as many people as possible aware of the demographic changes that are going to shape their future. And of course, any of the discussion we had today was not personal advice about your future, but just general information to help inform you.